The day I buried my husband, I learned something brutal. Some people do not ghost you when life gets hard. They circle. I watched 3 front-row chairs stay empty while strangers held my hands and whispered, asking where my family was, when I finally discovered why they did not come. It was not grief that knocked the air out of me. It was the fact they were already dividing my life up like an estate sale. I am Chloe Green. Standing on the manicured grass of Ridgeview Memorial Garden, I felt less like a widow and more like a spectacle. The Tennessee sky was a blinding, aggressive blue, the kind of weather that felt insulting when your world had just ended. It was a Tuesday in Cedar Hollow, and the heat was already rising off the pavement, distorting the air above the rows of granite headstones. I stood at the edge of the open grave, my heels sinking slightly into the soft earth, and I stared at the 3 empty chairs in the front row. They were white folding chairs, pristine and terrible. On the seat of each one, I had placed a small card printed on heavy cream stock. Reserved for Mother, reserved for Father, reserved for Brianna. The rest of the chairs were filled. Grant's co-workers from the ambulance service sat in a sea of navy blue uniforms, their faces tight with the specific, heavy silence of men who are used to saving lives, but could not save their friend. Neighbors were there. The lady who sells corn at the weekend market was there, but the 3 seats closest to me, the ones meant for the people who had sworn to love me since birth or since childhood, were empty. I checked my phone one last time, shielding the screen from the glare. The time was 11:12 a.m. in the morning. The service had technically started 12 minutes ago. There was a text message from Brianna Hale. It had arrived at 10:48. Work emergency. I cannot get away. So sorry, babe. Love you. I read it twice. Brianna was an interior designer who worked from home. Unless a swatch of fabric had caught fire or a sofa had spontaneously combusted, there was no emergency that could not wait an hour. She had sent it 12 minutes before she was supposed to be holding my hand. 12 minutes. Then there was the voicemail from my mother. I had let it go to voicemail because I was in the limousine, trying to remember how to breathe. I lifted the phone to my ear, pressing it hard against my head to hear over the low hum of the wind in the cedar trees. Chloe, it is Mom, the voice said. We are stuck on the highway. Car trouble. Smoke everywhere. We are waiting for a tow. We will not make it in time. We are just devastatingly sorry. I lowered the phone. I had heard my mother panic before. I had heard her when the oven broke before Thanksgiving, or when she lost her pearl earring in the carpet. This was not that voice. Her voice on the recording was smooth. It was level. It sounded like she was reading a grocery list or a script she had practiced in the mirror. There was no background noise, no whoosh of passing cars on a highway, no honking, just dead. Flat silence behind her lies. The preacher began to speak, his voice booming slightly to reach the back rows. He spoke of Grant's service, his kindness, the way he could calm a terrified child at a crash site. I tried to listen, I really did, but my eyes kept dragging back to those 3 white chairs. They looked like missing teeth in a smile. I could hear the whispers behind me. In a small town like Cedar Hollow, gossip travels faster than light. Where are her parents? Someone murmured. Is that her best friend's seat? Is she not here? God, she is all alone up there. I straightened my spine. I would not give them the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. Grant would not have wanted that. Grant was the steady one. He was the one who checked the tire pressure on my car every Sunday. He was the one who held my hair back when I had the flu. He did not panic, so I would not panic. My gaze drifted to the back of the crowd, seeking anything to anchor me other than the gaping hole in the front row. That was when I saw him. He was standing apart from the main group, in the shadow of a large oak tree. He was wearing a dark suit that looked a few years too old, the fabric straining slightly at the shoulders. He was not looking at the preacher. He was looking at me. I did not know him, yet I knew him instantly. He had the same jawline as Grant. He had the same way of standing, weight shifting slightly to the left, hands clasped loosely in front of him, but his eyes were what stopped my heart. They were Grant's eyes. As the service wound down and the line of mourners began to file past the casket to place their single white roses on the polished wood, the stranger moved. He did not get in line. He walked straight toward me. The crowd parted for him, sensing purpose. He stopped 2 feet away, up close. He looked rougher than Grant. There were lines around his mouth that spoke of hard living, and his hands were calloused, the knuckles scarred. "You must be Chloe," he said. His voice was gravel, low and rough. "I am," I said. My voice sounded thin, like paper tearing. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out 2 things. One was a folded American flag patch, the edges frayed. The red stripes faded to a soft brick color. The other was a photograph, creased down the middle. "I am Caleb," he said. "Caleb Wynne, Grant's cousin." Grant had mentioned a cousin once or twice. The black sheep, the one who left town at 18 and never came back. The family did not speak of him. "He told me you might come." I lied. I did not know if Grant had ever spoken to him. Caleb looked at the empty chairs in the front row. His gaze lingered on the tags that said, "Mother and Father." A muscle in his jaw jumped. "He did not just tell me I might come," Caleb said quietly, so only I could hear. "He called me. 6 months ago, when he got the diagnosis." I stared at him. 6 months ago. Grant was still telling me we had time. He was still telling me we would beat it. He begged me to show up. Caleb continued, his voice thick with something that sounded like suppressed rage. He said, "Caleb, if she is standing there alone, you get yourself to Tennessee. You stand there so she knows she is not the only one left." The air left my lungs. Grant knew, he had known, even back then, that my parents were hollow shells. He had known Brianna was fair weather. He had predicted this moment, standing in our kitchen while I made coffee, hiding his own fear to protect me. And he had made a contingency plan for his own funeral. "Thank you," I whispered. It was all I could manage. Caleb nodded. He pressed the faded flag patch into my hand. "He gave me this when we were kids. Said I needed it more than him. I reckon you need it now." He stepped back, taking a position just behind my right shoulder. He did not say another word, but he did not leave. He stood there like a guard dog, a physical barrier between me and the pitying stares of the town. The rest of the service blurred. I remember the sound of the dirt hitting the casket, a hollow, final thud that echoes in your bones. I remember shaking hands with 50 people whose names I would not recall tomorrow. Finally, the crowd thinned. The cars began to pull away, tires crunching on the gravel. I was left with the funeral director, Mr. Henderson, a man with a soft face and hands that felt like cold dough. He approached me with a clipboard, looking uncomfortable. He kept glancing at Caleb, who was still standing 5 feet away, watching the perimeter. "Mrs. Wynne," Mr. Henderson said, "there is just one final formality. We need to sign off on the transport and the certificate requests." "I can do that," I said. I reached for the pen. "Mr. Henderson pulled the clipboard back slightly. He cleared his throat. "Actually, that is what I needed to mention. We had a call this morning, very early, around 8 o'clock. I frowned. "A call? From who?" They did not leave a specific name, just said they were family handling the affairs. He said, he looked down at his shoes. They wanted to know if the death certificates were ready yet, and they wanted to order more, a lot more. "I have not ordered any yet," I said, confused. "I was going to do that next week." "I know." "Mr. Henderson said. His voice dropped to a whisper. "But this caller, they asked for 10 certified copies, in bulk, and they asked if they could pick them up today, before the service even ended." My stomach dropped. It felt like I was in a free fall. Who calls for death certificates before the body is even in the ground? Who needs 10 copies at 8 in the morning on the day of the funeral? "Did you give them any information?" I asked. My voice was sharp now. "No, ma'am," he said quickly. "Policy is next of kin only. That is you. I thought it was strange. They seemed very urgent about the life insurance paperwork." The world tilted. Life insurance. I looked at the empty chairs again. The white paint gleamed in the sun. Highway car trouble, my mother had said. Work emergency. Brianna had texted. They were not stuck on a highway. They were not working. They were making calls. They were trying to get the paperwork to access money that Grant had left behind. They did not come to the funeral because they were too busy trying to cash in on his death. I felt a coldness spread through my chest. It was not the numbness of grief anymore. It was something sharper. It was the absolute zero of realization. Do not release anything to anyone but me. I told Mr. Henderson, no matter who calls, no matter if they say they are my mother. He nodded, looking relieved. Of course, Mrs. Wynne, only you. I walked back to the limousine. Caleb opened the door for me. You okay? He asked. No. I said, I do not think I am. Good, he said. You should not be. The drive home was silent. The house looked exactly as I had left it 3 hours ago, but it felt different. It felt like a stage set where a tragedy had just finished performing. I walked inside, the silence pressing against my ears. I went straight to the small desk in the living room. Grant had been organized. He had files for everything. But 3 days before he died, he had given me a thick manila envelope. He had sealed it with tape and made me promise. Chloe, he had whispered, his breathing rattling in his chest, do not open this until the dirt is over me, not a minute before. And do not open it if people are around. Do it when you are alone. I had cried and told him to stop talking like that, but he had squeezed my hand with surprising strength. Promise me. I sat down at the desk. I was still wearing my black dress. I kicked off my heels. My feet ached. I picked up the envelope. It felt heavy. I ripped the tape. Inside, there was a stack of papers. On top was a handwritten letter on the yellow legal pad paper Grant loved to use. His handwriting was shaky. The letter slanted more than usual, but legible. I began to read. My dearest Chloe, if you are reading this, I am gone, and if you are reading this alone, then I was right. I stopped. I had to close my eyes for a second. He knew. He had bet on them failing me. And he had won. I looked at the papers beneath the letter. They were not love notes. They were bank records. They were screenshots of text messages I had never seen. There was a log of phone calls with dates and times. There was a printed email from a forensic accountant. I picked up a photo clipped to the back of the stack. It was a grainy picture, taken from a distance. It showed my father, Martin Green, shaking hands with a man I did not recognize in a parking lot. My father was holding a thick folder. I looked closer at the date stamp on the photo. It was taken 2 weeks after Grant's diagnosis. Grant had not just been dying in those last few months. He had been investigating. He had been watching them watch us. The grief that had been crushing me all day suddenly shifted. It hardened. It crystallized into something that felt less like sorrow and more like a weapon. I looked at the empty spot on the couch where Brianna used to sit and drink wine with me, telling me I was her sister. I looked at the kitchen table where my parents had sat once a year, judging our furniture, judging Grant. Mr. Henderson's voice echoed in my head. They asked for death certificates, in bulk. They thought I was weak. They thought I was the Chloe who cried when she got a flat tire. They thought I was the Chloe who let her mother critique her hair and let her best friend make passive-aggressive comments about her job. They thought they were ghosting me. They thought they could skip the funeral, handle the paperwork, and sweep in to collect the pieces of my shattered life. I looked down at Grant's shaky handwriting again. I did not leave you unprotected. Chloe, read everything, then wipe your eyes. I reached for the next page in the folder. It was a list of account transfers, and there, highlighted in yellow, was a transfer attempt from my own savings account, dated 3 days ago. Access attempted from an IP address registered to Brianna Hale. I did not cry. The tears had evaporated in the heat of the cemetery. I stood up and walked to the window. The sun was setting now, casting long shadows across the lawn. The world looked the same, but it wasn't. The circling had begun. The vultures were already at the door, picking at the lock, but they had made a mistake. They thought the funeral was the end of the story. They thought the widow would be too broken to notice the math not adding up. I touched the cold glass of the window. "Okay, Grant," I whispered to the empty room. "I am reading." I turned back to the desk, pulled the lamp closer, and began to study the anatomy of a betrayal. They had divided my life up like an estate sale, but they had forgotten one thing. I was the one holding the deed. To understand why the empty chairs at the funeral felt like a blade between my ribs, you have to understand the man they refused to honor. You have to understand Grant. And to do that, I have to go back to a Tuesday night 7 years ago. In the pouring rain, on the shoulder of Route 9, I was 24 years old, driving a sedan that sounded like a lawnmower, and I was stranded. My rear tire had blown out 3 miles past the last street lamp. I was standing in the mud, ruining my work shoes, trying to read a car manual by the light of my phone screen. I was crying, just a little bit, out of sheer frustration. Then a truck pulled over. It did not creep up slowly like a horror movie. It pulled over decisively, hazard lights flashing with a rhythm that felt safe. A man stepped out. He was not wearing a raincoat. He was wearing a dark suit and dress shoes that looked polished. He walked up to me, ignoring the rain plastering his dark hair to his forehead. He did not ask if I was a damsel in distress. He just looked at the flat tire, then at the jack I was holding upside down, and said, "Allow me." That was Grant. He changed the tire in 6 minutes flat. He knelt in the mud in those dress shoes. He got grease on the cuffs of his white shirt. When he was done, he stood up, wiped his hands on a rag from his truck, and smiled. It was not a flirtatious smile. It was the smile of a man who sees a problem and fixes it because that is just what you do. I offered him $20. He refused. I asked for his name. He said Grant Wynn. I asked if I could buy him coffee to make up for his ruined shoes. He looked down at his mud-caked Oxfords, laughed, and said coffee sounded like a fair trade. We went to a 24-hour diner called The Kettle, over cherry pie that was too sweet, and coffee that tasted like burnt hazelnuts. I learned he was a rescue paramedic. He had just come from a cousin's wedding, which explained the suit. He did not talk about himself much. He asked about me. He listened with a kind of intensity that made me feel like I was the only person in the room. He was not flashy. He did not brag about saving lives or the adrenaline of the job. He spoke about his work as if he were a carpenter or a mechanic. He stabilized things. That was his word. He said the world was chaotic, and his job was just to hold the chaos back for 10 minutes until the doctors could take over. On our third date, we sat on the hood of his truck, watching the sunset over the reservoir. I remember looking at his profile and feeling a sense of peace I had never known. I was used to boys who played games, or men who wanted me to be a trophy. Grant just wanted to be there. He turned to me that evening and said something that would become the foundation of our entire marriage. He said, "Chloe, I do not have much. I drive a truck with 100,000 miles on it, and I rent a duplex, but what I have is solid. I do not build things on sand." I fell in love with him right then. But I should have known that in my world. Solid is not enough. In the world I grew up in, appearances matter more than foundations. I worked at Brightwell Health Solutions as a patient coordinator. It sounds fancy, but mostly it meant I spent 10 hours a day being yelled at by people who were sick, scared, or broke. I managed schedules, fought with insurance companies, and tried to keep the doctors on time. By the time I got home, I was usually touched out. I did not want to speak. I did not want to be touched. I just wanted to stare at a wall. Grant never made me feel guilty for that. He never mocked my exhaustion. If I came home and collapsed on the sofa, he did not ask what was for dinner. He would just quietly order takeout or make a grilled cheese sandwich and place it on the table without a word. He protected my peace. He created a buffer zone between me and the demands of the world. But my parents, Diane and Martin Green, did not see the peace. They only saw the pay stub. I remember the first time I introduced Grant to them. It was at a steakhouse my father loved, the kind of place where the waiters wear tuxedos and the menu does not list prices. Grant wore a nice button-down shirt and slacks, but I saw my mother's eyes dart immediately to his watch. It was a rugged digital watch, A paramedic's watch, meant to take a pulse in the dark, not to impress country club members. My father, Martin, swirled his red wine and asked the questions that are actually accusations. So, Grant, he said, leaning back, a paramedic. That is a stepping stone, right? Are you planning to go to medical school? Grant put his fork down gently. No, sir, he said. I am good at what I do. I like being the first one on the scene. I plan to make a career of it. My mother, Diane, let out a small, tight laugh. A career? But surely, with the hours you work, it is hard to build a real future. I mean, financially speaking. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. Mom, I warned. Grant placed a hand on my knee under the table. It was warm and steady. He looked my father in the eye and said, We do just fine. I work hard. Chloe works hard. We are not looking to be rich. We are looking to be happy. My parents exchanged a look. It was a look I knew well. It was the look that said, How disappointing. After dinner, in the parking lot, my father pulled me aside while Grant went to bring the car around. He is a nice enough boy. Chloe, my father said, lighting a cigar. But you have to be realistic. He is an ambulance driver. He is blue collar. You were raised for better things. Love does not pay the mortgage in a good school district. I told my father to stop, but the seed was planted, not in me, but in them. They had categorized Grant as lesser, and once my parents categorized you, they never moved you to a different box. It was not just my parents. Brianna, my best friend since kindergarten, had her own way of chipping away at us. Brianna was an interior designer who believed that a person's worth could be determined by their thread count. She played the role of the supportive best friend perfectly, but there was always a sharp edge hidden in the fluff. We were having mimosas one Sunday morning. About 6 months into my relationship with Grant, I was gushing about how he had built me a bookshelf from scratch because I mentioned I needed more storage. That is so sweet, Brianna said, tilting her head. Really handy. It is just... Do you not worry that you are settling? I froze, my glass halfway to my mouth. What do you mean? She shrugged, adjusting her designer sunglasses. I just mean, you have so much potential. Chloe, you are smart. You are beautiful. You could have a doctor, or a lawyer, someone who could take you to Europe. Not just camping. I just do not want you to waste your potential playing house with someone who cannot upgrade your life. I told her I was happy. I told her I did not need an upgrade, but I noticed that whenever we all went out together, Brianna would make little comments. She would suggest restaurants she knew were out of Grant's budget, just to watch him politely decline. She would talk about her other friends' husbands who bought them diamonds, watching me to see if I flinched. Grant saw it too. He never got angry, but he got quiet. We got married 2 years later in a small ceremony. My parents paid for the reception but complained about the guest list size the entire time. They wanted to invite their business partners. Grant wanted to invite his shift partners. We compromised, which meant nobody was happy. A year after the wedding, we bought our house. It was a modest 3-bedroom ranch in Cedar Hollow. It needed work. The carpets were shag. The kitchen cabinets were a peeling yellow, and the landscaping was overgrown. But it had good bones, and it had a front porch with enough room for a swing. When we got the keys, Grant picked me up and spun me around in the empty living room. We are going to grow old here. Chloe, he promised, his voice echoing off the bare walls. I do not care if we have to repaint the whole place ourselves. I do not care if we drive old cars for the next 30 years. This is ours. No landlords, no parents, just us. We spent that first summer sweating and laughing, tearing up carpet and painting walls. We put a swing on the porch. We sat there in the evenings, drinking iced tea, listening to the crickets. It was the happiest time of my life, but even then, I noticed Grant kept a distinct boundary with my family. He was never rude. He always shook my father's hand. He always complimented my mother's cooking, but he was wary. He watched them the way he watched a storm front moving in over the mountains. He never let them pay for anything if he could help it. If we went to dinner, he insisted on splitting the bill or paying our share. If my father offered to help out with a renovation cost, Grant would politely decline, saying we would save up and do it when we could afford it. I used to get annoyed. I would say, "Grant, they just want to help. Let them buy the new dishwasher." Grant would shake his head, his eyes dark. "It is not help, Chloe, it is leverage. When people like that give you money, they are buying a vote in your life. I am not letting them vote on our marriage." I thought he was being proud. I did not realize he was being protective. About 3 years into our marriage, I noticed a change in his routine. Grant had always been responsible, but he started becoming meticulous about our finances. He bought a label maker. He bought a set of color-coded folders. He started documenting everything, every bill paid, every receipt for the house renovations. He scanned them and saved them to a hard drive, and then he filed the physical copies in the safe he had bolted to the floor of our closet. I found him one night at the kitchen table, surrounded by papers. It was 11 at night. He looked tired. "Grant, honey, what is this?" I asked, rubbing his shoulders. "You are acting like the IRS is coming for us." He looked up, and for a second, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes that looked like fear. Not panic, but a deep, calculating concern. "I am just being prepared," he said, covering my hand with his. "Life is unpredictable, Chloe. In my line of work, I see it every day. People die, and they leave a mess behind. I never want to leave you with a mess. I want you to know where every single penny is." "But why now?" I asked. "We are young, we are healthy." He stacked the papers neatly, aligning the edges with precision. "Because," he said softly, looking toward the window where the darkness pressed against the glass, "because sometimes the people who are supposed to take care of you are the ones you have to watch the closest." I thought he was talking about his job. I thought he was talking about the erratic family members he met on emergency calls, the ones who fought over wallets while the paramedics were doing CPR. I did not realize he was talking about the people who came to our barbecues. I did not realize he was talking about the woman I called Mom, or the best friend I texted every single day. Grant was reading the room, just like he did when he walked into a volatile accident scene. He saw the cracks in the foundation that I was too close to see. He saw the way my mother looked at our house like it was a temporary mistake I needed to be rescued from. He saw the way Brianna tracked our spending like she was keeping a ledger. He knew that the love story was real, but he also knew that the ground underneath us was shifting. And while I was busy planning our next vacation and dreaming about babies, Grant was quietly, methodically building a fortress around me, one receipt at a time. He was preparing for a war I did not even know had been declared. It started with the coffee cup. It was a Tuesday morning, ordinary in every way. The kind of morning you take for granted until you look back and realize it was the last normal moment of your life. Grant was standing at the kitchen counter, pouring his usual dark roast. I was buttering toast, scrolling through work emails on my phone. I heard the ceramic shatter before I saw it. When I looked up, Grant was staring at his hand as if it belonged to someone else. The mug lay in shards on the linoleum, a dark puddle of coffee spreading toward his socks. He was not reaching for a towel. He was just blinking, a confused, slow blink that made the hair on my arms stand up. I asked him what happened, my voice jumping an octave. He looked at me, and for a second, his eyes were blank. Then he shook his head, a quick, jerky motion, and the familiar Grant returned. He laughed, but the sound was thin. He said his grip just slipped. He said he needed more sleep. He made a joke about being clumsy before 8 in the morning. We cleaned it up. We went to work, but that shattered mug was the first crack in the dam. Over the next 2 weeks, the episodes came closer together. It was not dramatic at first. It was subtle. He would stop in the middle of a sentence, searching for a word that should have been easy. He would call the refrigerator the cold box. He would get dizzy standing up from the couch and have to grab the door frame to steady himself. He played it down. He was a paramedic, and like most medical professionals, he was the worst kind of patient. He told me it was stress. He told me it was dehydration. He told me to stop worrying, that I was looking for trouble where there was none. But I saw him rubbing his temples when he thought I was not looking. I saw him squinting at the television as if the image were splitting in two. Then came the call. It was a Thursday afternoon. I was at the clinic, arguing with an insurance rep about a denied claim for a toddler's asthma inhaler. My cell phone buzzed on my desk. It was Grant's supervisor. Mike. Mike never called me during a shift. I picked up, and the silence on the other end lasted 2 seconds too long. Chloe, Mike said. His voice was tight, controlled. Grant went down. We were on a call at the nursing home on Elm, and he collapsed. We are transporting him to Cedar Hollow Regional right now. I do not remember hanging up. I do not remember grabbing my purse. I remember driving. I remember my hands shaking so hard on the steering wheel that I could barely keep the car in the lane. I remember praying to a God I had not spoken to in years, bargaining with the universe. Take the house. I thought, take my job. Just do not take him. I arrived at the emergency room still wearing my Brightwell Health ID badge. I ran through the sliding doors, ignoring the security guard, scanning the hallway for a familiar face. I found Mike standing outside Trauma Room 2. He looked pale. He was a big man, a veteran of 20 years on the ambulance, and he looked terrified. He is stable, Mike said, catching me before I could burst into the room, but he is confused. Chloe, he does not know what day it is. I went in. Grant was lying on the gurney, hooked up to monitors that beeped with a rhythm that was too fast. His eyes were open, but they were darting around the room, unable to focus. When he saw me, he smiled, but it was lopsided. Hey, he slurred. I think I forgot to lock the back door. He had not forgotten the door. He was losing his mind. The next 48 hours were a blur of MRI machines, spinal taps, and doctors with faces that gave away nothing. We waited in a room that smelled of bleach and fear. I slept in a plastic chair. Grant slept in fits and starts, waking up to ask me the same questions over and over. Then came the diagnosis. It landed like a hammer. We were in a small consultation room with no windows. The neurologist, Dr. Aris, sat across from us. He did not use soft words. He did not use euphemisms. He used words like aggressive and high-grade glioma. He showed us images of Grant's brain on a screen. There was a mass. It was large. It was in a place they could not easily reach. We can try radiation to slow it down. Doctor, Aris said, his voice monotone. But surgery is high risk. The location is deep. I asked the question I did not want to ask. I asked about the timeline. Doctor, Aris looked at his hands, then at me. With treatment, maybe 6 months. Without it, maybe 2. The room went silent. It was a vacuum silence, sucking the air out of my lungs. I looked at Grant. He was sitting on the edge of the exam table, wearing a flimsy hospital gown. He looked so healthy. His arms were still strong. He had a tan from working in the yard the week before. It was impossible that there was a ticking clock inside his head. Grant took a breath. He reached out and took my hand. His grip was firm. Okay, Grant said. We fight it. We do what we can. He was brave. He was so incredibly brave in that room. But that night, when the lights were out and the hospital was quiet except for the hum of the ventilation, I saw the truth. He thought I was asleep. He turned his face to the pillow, and I saw his shoulders shake. I heard a sound so small, so broken, that it shattered me more than the doctor's words. He was terrified, and he was trying to hide it to protect me. News traveled fast in Cedar Hollow. By the next morning, my phone was full of texts. My parents arrived at noon. Diane walked in first, holding her purse like a shield. Martin followed, looking at the floor. They did not rush to the bed. They stood near the door, as if the illness were contagious. Oh, Grant, my mother said, her face arranging itself into a grimace of sympathy. You look tired. I have a brain tumor. Diane, Grant said, his voice dry. I am allowed to look tired. My father cleared his throat. He walked over to the window and looked out at the parking lot. So, he said, not turning around, what is the plan? The doctor said 6 months? Dad, I snapped, do not talk like he is already gone. Martin turned, his expression pragmatic. I am just being realistic. Chloe, you have to think about the future. Does his insurance cover long-term care? Or is this going to drain your savings? My mother chimed in, stepping closer but still not touching him. Your father is right. Honey, you need to look at the paperwork. Is the house in both names? If he passes, the probate can be a nightmare if you are not prepared. I felt a heat rise in my chest that made me dizzy. My husband was lying in a hospital bed, facing the end of his life at 31, and they were worried about probate court. Get out, I whispered. Chloe, be reasonable. My mother started. I said, get out, I screamed. The nurse poked her head in, alarmed. Grant squeezed my hand. It is okay. Chloe, he said softly. Let them stay. They are just being themselves. They stayed for 20 minutes. They asked 3 more questions about money. They did not ask Grant how he felt. They did not ask if he was in pain. They left with a promise to check in, and as they walked out, I saw my father glance at Grant's chart as if checking a stock price. Then came Brianna. She swept in an hour later, bringing a wave of expensive perfume and a foil-covered dish. Lasagna, she announced, placing it on the bedside table where there was no room. I made it myself. Comfort food. She hugged me. It was a tight, squeeze-hard hug that felt like it was meant for an audience. Then she went to Grant. She sat on the edge of his bed, something even I had not done because he was in pain, and took his hand. Oh, you poor thing. She cooed. I cannot even imagine. She pulled out her phone. I am going to start a prayer chain, she said. Hold on. Let me get a picture for the group so they know who they are praying for. Before Grant could protest, she snapped a photo. In the picture, she was looking sadly at the camera, holding his hand. Grant looked exhausted and pale. She posted it immediately. I saw the notification pop up on my phone a minute later. The caption read, Heartbroken for my best friend and her hubby. Life is so unfair. Please send prayers and good vibes. Besties fighter so sad. It felt gross. It felt performative. It felt like she was collecting proof that she was a good friend, documenting her attendance at our tragedy so she could get credit for it later. Grant saw it too, when she left, promising to return with more food. He looked at me and said, She did not even ask what the diagnosis was. He was right. She hadn't. She just wanted the photo. Grant did not want to die in the hospital. He made that clear. I want to be home, he told the doctors. I want to be on my porch. I want to be with Chloe. So we brought him home. I took a leave of absence from the clinic. I rearranged the living room. We moved the sofa against the wall and brought in a hospital bed. I set it up so he could see out the front window, so he could see the oak tree and the street. I turned the dining room table into a pharmacy station, organizing pills by time of day. Our world shrank to the size of that room. At first, people called, neighbors dropped by, but as the weeks went on, and Grant got worse, the visits stopped. People do not know what to do with a dying man. They do not know what to say, so they stay away. I would leave voicemails for my mother. He is having a bad day. I could use some help with the laundry. She would text back 4 hours later. So sorry. Busy at the club today. Hope he feels better. I called Brianna when Grant fell in the bathroom and I could not lift him. She did not answer. I sent a text. Need help lifting him. Please. She replied the next morning. Oh my God, I was asleep. Did you get him up? You are such a warrior. Chloe? I realized then that I was alone. My support system was a mirage. It looked real from a distance, but when I reached for it, my hand went through air. The only people who showed up were the ones with no obligation to do so. Grant's co-workers, the paramedics. They did not call first. They just arrived. Mike came by on his day off to fix the leaky faucet in the kitchen because Grant had mentioned it was bothering him. A young EMT named Sarah brought groceries and put them away without asking me what I needed. They came in shifts. They sat with Grant while I showered. They told him stories about work. They treated him like a man, not a patient. One afternoon, Caleb Wynn showed up. I had never met him, but Grant had asked for him. He stood on the porch, awkward and large. He did not come in. He just handed me a bag of venison jerky that Grant loved and said, "Tell him I am here if he needs a heavy lift." I watched him walk back to his truck. He was rough. He was estranged. But he had driven an hour just to drop off dried meat because he remembered his cousin liked it. Inside the house, the air was getting heavy. Grant was losing his mobility. The headaches were blinding him, but his mind, in the moments between the pain, was sharp. One night, I was sitting on the floor next to his bed. The house was quiet. "Chloe," he whispered. "I am here," I said, taking his hand. "Are they helping you?" he asked. I knew who he meant. "Yes," I lied. "Mom calls every day. Brianna brought dinner yesterday." He squeezed my hand. His grip was weaker now. "You are a terrible liar." Chloe Green. Tears pricked my eyes. "I do not need them," I said fiercely. "I have you." He looked at me, and his eyes were full of a sorrow that had nothing to do with dying. "You need an army," he said, "and I am leaving you with ghosts." He closed his eyes, drifting back into the sleep that claimed more and more of his hours. I sat there in the dark, listening to the hum of the oxygen concentrator. I looked at my phone. No notifications, no missed calls. I realized Grant was right. The illness had not just revealed a tumor, it had revealed the rot in the roots of my life. The people I thought were my foundation were crumbling, and the man I was losing was the only thing holding the roof up. I walked over to the desk where Grant kept his folders. I opened the one labeled Finances. Everything was there, every password, every account number, and on the top of the stack, a new note, written in shaky script. "Watch the joint account. Watch Brianna." I stared at the paper. The dread tightened around my throat. Colder than the fear of death. He was sick. He was dying. And yet he was still the only one paying attention. Money became a second language I hated speaking. Before the diagnosis, numbers were just things that lived in spreadsheets or on price tags at the grocery store. Now, they were monsters that lived under the bed. I learned that insurance is not a safety net. It is a sieve. It catches the big rocks, but the sand slips through, and soon you are buried in it. I learned that a hospital bed rental costs $300 a month, not covered. I learned that the specific anti-nausea medication that actually worked for Grant cost $80 a pill, and the insurance company required a prior authorization that took 7 business days to process. Grant did not have 7 days to wait for nausea relief. So I paid it. The mail stopped being about birthday cards or catalogs. It became a daily assault. Explanation of benefits forms arrived in stacks, looking like terrifying receipts. Patient responsibility, $1,200. Patient responsibility, $450. I stopped sleeping. Not just because I was listening for Grant's breathing, but because I was doing mental math in the dark. I was calculating how many shifts I would have to work when, if, I went back. I was calculating how long our savings would last if we skipped the mortgage payment for 1 month. Grant tried to help. Even with his vision blurring and his words tangling, he would point to the laptop, log it, he would say, "Keep the receipt." But he did not know the totals. I hid them from him. I did not want his last weeks to be priced by the hour. Then came the kindness of strangers, which is sharper than cruelty because it breaks down your defenses. Mike, Grant's supervisor, showed up on a Wednesday evening. He looked uncomfortable, standing on the porch in his civilian clothes, holding a thick manila envelope. "The guys put together a spaghetti dinner at the fire hall," Mike said, shifting his weight. "And we passed a boot around. It is not a fortune. Chloe, but we wanted to help with the groceries, or the meds." He handed me the envelope. It felt heavy, thick. I opened it in the kitchen after he left. It was full of cash, 20s, 50s, a few hundreds, and a lot of crumpled ones and 5s. I counted it twice, $3,420. I sat on the floor and cried. I cried because it was beautiful, and I cried because it was humiliating. I was a grown woman with a full-time job and a husband who had worked since he was 16. And we were surviving on a passed-around boot. I put the money back in the envelope. I wrote medical cash on the front in black marker and placed it on the kitchen counter. Next to the fruit bowl, I planned to deposit it the next morning. That was the day Brianna came over. She breezed in around 4 in the afternoon. She looked fresh, wearing a linen jumpsuit that probably cost more than my car payment. She brought a bottle of wine, which she opened for herself, pouring a glass while leaning against my counter. "You look exhausted, babe," she said, sipping the wine. "Like, actually gray. Are you eating?" "I am fine," I said. "Washing dishes. Just bills. It is a lot." Brianna sighed dramatically. "I can imagine. Dying is expensive, isn't it?" I flinched. She said it so casually. "Look," she said, putting the glass down. I was thinking, I know things must be tight. I had a good month with that client in River Heights. I want to help. She pulled out her phone. "I can float you a loan, just to take the pressure off. Say, $2,500? I stopped scrubbing the pan. $2,500 would cover the mortgage and the credit card bill for the month. It would let me breathe. "Brianna, I cannot ask you to do that," I said. "I do not know when I can pay it back." "Don't be silly." She waved a hand. "Pay me back whenever. When the insurance settles. When, you know, when things are done." She tapped her screen. "I will send it now. But do me a favor. Download this app called LedgerLink. It is what I use for my business. It keeps everything official so my accountant doesn't yell at me. I can transfer it instantly. It seemed weird. Why not just write a check? But I was too tired to argue. I downloaded the app. I set up a profile. I linked my bank account. "Sent?" she said, flashing a smile. $2,500. Go buy yourself some peace of mind." I hugged her. I genuinely hugged her. I thought, she is trying. She is really trying. The next morning, I woke up with a headache that felt like a drill behind my eyes. I checked my bank account on my phone, expecting to see the balance higher. I stared at the screen. The balance was lower. There was a transaction pending. Withdrawal. $2,500. I blinked. I rubbed my eyes. I must have been reading it wrong. Or maybe the app Brianna used showed the transfer as a debit before it cleared as a credit? That happens sometimes, right? I was so tired. I had been up 3 times in the night to help Grant to the bathroom. My brain felt like it was full of cotton. It is just a glitch. I told myself, I will check it tomorrow. I did not check it tomorrow because Diane called. My mother never called just to chat. She called with an agenda. "Chloe," she said, her voice bright and chipper. "I was just reading an article about probate courts. Terrifying stuff. Truly. What do you want?" "Mom?" I asked, holding the phone between my shoulder and ear while I crushed pills into applesauce for Grant. "I am just asking questions," she said, sounding offended. "Did Grant ever update his beneficiaries? On the life insurance? And the retirement accounts? Why does it matter?" I asked. "Well," she let out a little laugh, a tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. "You know how men are. Sometimes they forget to change things from when they were single, or, before. You just want to make sure it is all going to you, right? Not to, I don't know, some old girlfriend or a sibling." "Grant does not have siblings," I said, "and he does not have old girlfriends. Just check." "Sweetie," she said, "for your own good. You do not want to be destitute." She hung up. The word destitute hung in the air like a foul smell. An hour later, my father, Martin, stopped by. He said he was in the neighborhood, which was a lie because he lived 20 minutes away in a gated community. He walked into the house like a building inspector. He tapped the walls. He looked at the ceiling fan. "Grant asleep?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "He had a rough night." Martin nodded. He wandered into the small room we used as an office. I followed him. He was standing in front of the filing cabinet. His eyes moved to the closet, where the safe was bolted to the floor. "That safe," he said, pointing with his chin. "Is it fireproof?" "Yes," I said. "Good," he said. "And you have the combination? Written down somewhere? In case, in case you forget it in the grief?" "I know the combination." "Dad," I said, my voice cold. He looked at me, his eyes flat. Just being practical. Chloe, someone has to be. He left 10 minutes later. I felt like I needed a shower. I felt like he had not come to visit his dying son-in-law. He had come to appraise the inventory. By 5 o'clock that evening, I was running on fumes. Grant needed a sponge bath. He was weak, his skin paper thin. It was a two-person job. Really. But I was doing it alone. Brianna was still there. She had come back to check on me. I will clean up the kitchen, she offered. You go take care of him. Take your time. Thank you. I said, you are a lifesaver. I went into the living room. I spent 40 minutes gently washing Grant, changing his sheets, making him comfortable. He fell asleep holding my hand. When I came back out to the kitchen, it was sparkling. The dishes were done. The counters were wiped down. Brianna was gone. She had left a note. Had to run to a client. Love you. I walked over to the counter to get a glass of water. The envelope, the manila envelope with medical cash written on it, it was gone. I froze. I looked around. Maybe she moved it? Maybe she put it in a drawer to keep it safe? I tore the kitchen apart. I opened every drawer. I checked the trash can. It was empty. She had taken the trash out. I checked the fridge. I checked the top of the microwave. $3,420. Gone. My heart hammered against my ribs. I grabbed my phone and called Brianna. Hey, babe. She answered on the first ring. Did you see the kitchen? I scrubbed that sink for 10 minutes. Brianna, I said, my voice shaking. Where is the envelope? What envelope? The manila one. On the counter. It had the fundraiser money in it. There was a pause. Oh, the paper one? I threw away a bunch of junk mail and old papers that were piled up. It looked like trash. Chloe, it had coffee stains on it. It had $3,000 in it. I screamed. Whoa. Calm down, she said, her voice turning sharp. There was no money on the counter. I wiped that counter down myself. There was nothing there but some old flyers. I put it right there. I insisted, next to the fruit bowl. Chloe, Brianna said, her tone shifting to a patronizing soothe. Honey, you are exhausted. You have not slept in 3 days. Are you sure you didn't put it somewhere else? Remember last week when you lost your keys and they were in the freezer? I stopped. I had found my keys in the freezer last week. I don't know. I stammered. I thought I left it there. You are grieving. Babe, she said softly. Your brain is fried. It is caregiver fatigue. It causes memory gaps. You probably hid it for safekeeping and forgot. It will turn up. Do not blame me for cleaning your house. She hung up. I stood in the middle of my clean kitchen, shaking. Was she right? Was I losing my mind? I looked at my hands. They were trembling. I was tired. I was so tired I could hear colors. Maybe I did hide it. Maybe I put it in the safe and forgot. I ran to the safe. I punched in the code. I opened it. The envelope was not there. But something else was wrong. The stack of folders Grant kept, the ones with the financial records, looked different. They were slightly askew. Grant was obsessed with alignment. He used a ruler to straighten his papers. These were tilted. Someone had been in the safe. I sat back on my heels, the cold realization washing over me. I did not move the money. I did not imagine the withdrawal. I waited until 2 a.m. The house was silent. Grant was breathing rhythmically in the living room. I took my laptop to the bathroom and locked the door. I sat on the rim of the tub and opened the browser. I needed to see the bank account again. I needed to know I wasn't crazy. I typed in the bank's URL. I entered my username. I entered my password. Incorrect password. I frowned. I typed it again, carefully. Grant Chloe, 2019. My pulse started to race. I clicked Forgot Password. A recovery code has been sent to the email on file. I opened my email. Nothing. I refreshed. Nothing. I looked back at the bank screen. It masked the email address, showing only the first and last letters, r.o.com. My email started with a C. Grant started with a G. r.s. Raina Styles. That was the name of Brianna's design firm, Raina Styles Interiors. I stared at the screen until the pixels blurred. Someone had logged in. Someone had changed the password. Someone had changed the recovery email so I could not get back in. It was not a glitch. It was not exhaustion. I looked at the bathroom mirror. My face was pale. Dark circles under my eyes like bruises. I looked like a victim. I looked like someone easy to knock over. But under the fear, under the exhaustion, a tiny spark lit up. It was the anger. I closed the laptop. I did not try to log in again. I did not want to alert them that I knew. Grant had warned me. Watch the joint account. He had written. I stood up. I walked out of the bathroom and went to the living room. I checked Grant's morphine pump. I checked his oxygen. Then I went to the closet, reached into the very back, inside a box of old winter boots, and pulled out the notebook I had bought the day after the funeral home called about the certificates. I sat in the dark, illuminated only by the green light of the oxygen machine. I wrote down the date. I wrote, cash envelope missing, $3,420. Brianna had access. I wrote, bank password changed. Recovery email matches Brianna's business. I wrote, Martin asked for safe combination. I was not crazy. I was being hunted. But the thing about hunting is, if you don't kill the prey with the first shot, you just teach it how to hide. And I was learning fast. The paranoia began to settle into my bones like the damp cold of a Tennessee winter. It was no longer a frantic, buzzing anxiety. It was a heavy, quiet certainty. I was living in a house with a dying man, and I was being circled by people who were waiting for him to take his last breath so they could exhale and start counting the money. It was a Tuesday afternoon. 3 days after I had discovered the password change on our bank account, the air in the house was stale, smelling of antiseptic and lavender oil, a scent I would later come to associate with pure dread. My phone was dead, sitting on the charger in the kitchen. Grant was asleep, his breathing shallow and rattling, a sound that filled every corner of the room. I needed to call the pharmacy. Grant's pain medication was running low, and the specialty compound required 24 hours to mix. Brianna was on the back porch, smoking a cigarette. She had started smoking again, claiming the stress of watching me suffer was getting to her. I walked to the sliding glass door and slid it open. "Bree," I said, "my phone is dead. Can I borrow yours to call the pharmacy? It will just take a second." She jumped, startled. She was typing furiously on her screen. She quickly locked the phone and handed it to me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Of course. Babe," she said. "Passcode is 1111. Easy." She stayed on the porch to finish her cigarette. I walked back into the living room, away from Grant's bed so I would not disturb him. I unlocked her phone. It opened to her last used app, which was her text messages. I did not mean to snoop. I really didn't. I was just trying to find the dial pad. But the screen was bright, and the last thread was open. At the top of the screen, the contact name was Diane Green. My mother. I froze. Brianna and my mother were not friends. They tolerated each other. Brianna usually made fun of my mother's country club pretensions, and my mother usually criticized Brianna's loud fashion choices. Why were they texting? I looked at the last message, sent 2 minutes ago by Brianna. "She is cracking. I think we can pivot to Plan B by Friday." My stomach turned over. It felt like I had swallowed a stone. Plan B? Pivot? These were business terms. These were strategy terms. They were talking about me like I was a project to be managed, or an obstacle to be removed. I did not scroll up. I wanted to. I wanted to read every word, but I heard the sliding door handle jiggle. Brianna was coming back in. I quickly tapped the home button, opened the phone app, and dialed the pharmacy. When Brianna walked in, I was holding the phone to my ear, listening to the hold music. "Got through?" she asked, watching me closely. "On hold," I said. My voice sounded steady. I was surprised by my own ability to act. "Thanks for the phone. Anytime," she said. She held out her hand. "I actually need to check an email. Can I grab it back?" I handed her the phone. As she took it, our fingers brushed. Her skin was warm. Mine was ice cold. Plan B. I thought, what is Plan B? A week passed. The atmosphere in the house shifted. It became suffocating. I started watching them. I watched how my mother looked at the furniture when she visited, her eyes cataloging the value of the antique sideboard. I watched how Brianna lingered near the mail pile. One evening, around dusk, I was in the kitchen rinsing out Grant's feeding tube. The window above the sink was cracked open to let in the cool evening air. Brianna was outside on the front porch. She thought I was in the back of the house with Grant. I heard her voice. She was whispering, but the night air carried the sound clearly. "She is not thinking clearly," Brianna hissed. "She is a mess. We need her to sign before it is too late. If he dies before we get the power of attorney transferred, it goes to probate. Diane, we lose control." I stood frozen at the sink, the water running over my hands. Power of attorney. They wanted me to sign a power of attorney. They wanted legal control over my decisions. They were going to frame it as helping me. They were going to say I was too grief-stricken to manage the finances. So they would graciously step in and handle it for me, and once they had power of attorney, they could empty the accounts, they could sell the house, they could do whatever they wanted. I turned off the faucet. I dried my hands. I walked to the front door and opened it. Brianna spun around, phone pressed to her ear. She looked guilty for a split second. Then her face smoothed into a mask of concern. "I have to go," she said into the phone. "Bye." She hung up. "Who was that?" I asked. "Just a client." She said, "Nightmare renovation. You know how it is." It sounded like my mother. I said. Brianna laughed. "Your mother? God, no. Why would I be talking to Diane?" I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had held my hair back when I threw up in college. I looked at the woman who had been the maid of honor at my wedding, and I realized I did not know her at all. I was looking at a stranger wearing my best friend's face. I decided to push. I needed to see how far she would go. "Bree," I said, leaning against the doorframe, "I wanted to ask you about something. That loan you sent me, the $2,500. She stiffened slightly. "Yeah? What about it? Did it help?" "It never showed up." I said, "In fact, there was a withdrawal for that exact amount from my account the next day." Brianna's expression shifted. She did not look surprised. She looked wounded. Her lower lip trembled. "Chloe," she said, her voice dripping with hurt, "are you accusing me of something?" "I'm just asking." I said, "The app you made me download. That app is secure." She interrupted. "I use it for million-dollar contracts. Look, babe, I know you are stressed. I know you are not sleeping, but do not take it out on me. You probably transferred it yourself and forgot. You were so out of it that day. I did not transfer money out," I said firmly. She sighed, a sound of immense patience. Okay, maybe it was a hacking thing. I will help you look into it later. But honestly, Chloe, it hurts that your first instinct is to blame the only person who is actually here helping you." She wiped a tear from her cheek. It was a magnificent performance. If I had not seen the Plan B text, I might have believed her. I might have apologized. "I am sorry." I said, "I am just tired." "I know," she said, stepping forward to hug me. "I forgive you. Just try to rest. You are getting paranoid." I let her hug me. I felt her heart beating against my chest. It was a steady, calm rhythm. She was not nervous. She was a predator who thought the prey was already caught in the trap. That night, Grant had a moment. It was 3 a.m. The house was finally quiet. Brianna had gone home. The only light came from the street lamp filtering through the blinds. Grant stirred. I was sitting in the chair next to the bed, dozing. "Chloe?" His voice was clear. It was not the slurred, confused mumble of the last few weeks. It was Grant's voice. I jumped up. "I am here. Do you need water?" He shook his head slightly. He looked at me, and his eyes were focused. He saw me. He really saw me. "Have they been asking you about money again?" He whispered. My heart broke. Here he was, his body failing him, his brain betraying him, and his only worry was whether the wolves were at the door. He knew them. He had always known them. I could have told him the truth. I could have told him about the missing cash, the blocked bank account, The text messages, the whispers on the porch. I could have unburdened myself, but I looked at his face. I saw the lines of pain etched around his mouth. I saw the fear he tried so hard to hide. He had days left, maybe hours. I was not going to let his final thoughts be about betrayal. I was not going to let him die thinking he had failed to protect me. I smoothed the hair back from his forehead. No, baby, I lied. They have been great. Mom brought soup. Brianna is helping with the cleaning. Everyone is just worried about you. We are fine. The money is fine. He searched my face. I held my smile steady, even though my insides were screaming. Okay, he breathed, closing his eyes. That is good. That is good. He drifted back to sleep. I sat there and wept silently, the tears running down my face and dripping onto my hands. I promised him then. I promised him I would handle it. I would not burden him, but I would burn them down. The next morning, the mail arrived. I had signed up for the Postal Service's informed delivery emails months ago, another one of Grant's organizational habits I had adopted. The email showed a scan of every envelope arriving that day. There was an image of a government envelope. It was a benefits check, a retroactive disability payment we had been fighting for. $3,000. I waited for the mail carrier. I heard the truck. I heard the mailbox lid snap shut. I walked out immediately. Brianna was in the driveway, getting something out of her car. She waved. I opened the mailbox. It was empty. I looked at Brianna. She was walking toward me, holding a coffee cup. "Morning," she chirped. "Mail came already?" "It is empty," I said. "Oh," she said. "Maybe they are running late? Or maybe there was nothing today." I looked at her oversized tote bag. It was sitting open on the passenger seat of her car. I could see the corner of a white envelope sticking out from under a scarf. I did not confront her, not yet. I did not have the strength for a physical fight, and she would just deny it. She would say I was seeing things. I walked back inside. "Yeah," I said, "maybe tomorrow." I went straight to the guest bedroom, which had a lock on the door. I locked it. I took out my old laptop, the one I had not used in years, the one that was never connected to the Wi-Fi. Brianna had the password to. I tethered it to my phone's data connection. I went to work. First, I froze my credit with all 3 bureaus. It took 20 minutes. Next, I created a new email address, chloewynn88@securemail.com. Then, I called the bank. Not the customer service line. I called the fraud department directly. I told them my identity had been compromised. I told them to lock the joint account down so tight that even I could not access it without walking into a branch with 2 forms of ID. "Mrs. Wynn," the agent asked, "do you want to report a specific unauthorized user?" "Not yet." I said, "Just freeze it." I did not want to tip them off. If the account was just frozen for security, Brianna would think it was a bank error. If I reported her, the police would show up, and the game would be over too soon. I needed more. I needed undeniable proof. I opened my notebook. I logged the missing check. Date, October 12th. Item, disability check. Status, stolen from mailbox. Witness, Brianna present. I felt a cold rage settling in my chest. It was better than grief. Grief made you weak. Rage made you sharp. But the biggest shock was yet to come. 2 days later, I was cleaning out my email inbox on my phone, deleting the hundreds of sympathy spam messages. I saw an email from a scheduling service called DocuSign Notary. Subject, confirmation. Your appointment is scheduled. I frowned. I clicked on it. Dear Chloe Wynn, this email confirms your appointment with a mobile notary for October 15th at 2 p.m. Location, Starling Coffee House, Cedar Hollow. I stared at the date. October 15th was yesterday. Yesterday at 2 p.m. I had been sitting on the floor of my living room, reading The Hobbit aloud to Grant because the sound of my voice soothed him. I had not left the house. I had not gone to a coffee shop. I scrolled down. There was a link to view the document summary. I clicked it. Document type, General Power of Attorney. Signer, Chloe Green Wynn, Status: completed. I stopped breathing. Someone had gone to a coffee shop. Someone had pretended to be me. Someone had met with a notary and signed my name on a document that gave them control over my entire life. And since the notary had signed off on it, that meant they had ID. They had a driver's license with my name on it. My purse. I ran to the hallway where I kept my purse. I dug through it. My wallet was there. My license was there. I pulled it out. It looked normal, but then I angled it in the light. The lamination on the corner was peeling slightly. It felt different, thinner. I looked at the photo. It was me, but it was an old photo, one from my college graduation. I looked closer. The expiration date was off by 1 day. It was a fake, a high-quality fake, but a fake. They had not just stolen my money, they had cloned my identity. I sank to the floor, clutching the fake license. This was not just greed. This was a crime ring, and it was being run by my mother and my best friend. I looked toward the living room where Grant lay dying. He had tried to warn me. He had told me to build a fortress. I realized then that I was not just fighting for my financial survival. I was fighting for my life. I stood up. I put the fake license in my pocket. I went back to the notebook. I wrote, October 15th, identity theft, power of attorney forged. They think they own me. I closed the notebook. I heard Brianna's car pull into the driveway. She was early today. I walked to the mirror in the hallway. I fixed my hair. I practiced a smile. It was a terrible, brittle smile, but it would have to do. Let them think they won. I whispered to my reflection. Let them think I am the idiot they want me to be. I opened the front door. Hey, Bree, I called out, forcing warmth into my voice. I am so glad you are here. I really need your help with some paperwork today. She smiled. That shark-like smile. Of course, babe, that is what family is for. Yes, I thought, that is exactly what you are for. The shift from treatment to hospice is not just a change in medical codes, it is a change in the light. The hospital bed in our living room stopped being a place where we fought a war and became a raft where we waited for the tide to go out. The hospice nurse was a woman named Elena. She had hands that were always warm and a voice that never hurried. She came in on a Thursday, carrying a bag of supplies that looked deceptively normal. Lotions, sponges, droppers for water. She checked Grant's vitals, adjusted the morphine pump, and then she looked at me. I must have looked like a ghost myself. I had not washed my hair in 3 days. I was wearing Grant's sweatpants. Elena led me into the kitchen while Grant slept. She made tea, moving around my kitchen with a familiarity that should have been intrusive but felt anchoring. You need to call them. Chloe, she said, placing a mug in front of me. Whoever needs to say goodbye. You need to call them now. I stared at the steam rising from the tea. I have called them. I said, they are busy. Elena looked at me over the rim of her glasses. She did not look surprised. She looked resigned. Honey, she said softly, I have been doing this for 20 years. Dying is a mirror. It reflects exactly who people are. Now is when people show their true shape. Do not be surprised if the shape is ugly. Just focus on the man in that bed. Her words stuck in my chest. True shape. I went back to the living room and picked up my phone. I dialed my parents' house. My mother answered on the second ring. I could hear the background noise of a television and the clinking of silverware. They were eating dinner. Mom, I said, it is time. The nurse says it is a matter of days, maybe hours. You need to come. There was a pause. I heard her cover the phone and murmur something to my father. Then she came back on the line. Oh, Chloe, she said, her voice sounding stressed. But not about Grant. This is just terrible timing. Truly terrible. The Cedar Hollow Charity Ball is this weekend. Your father is the keynote speaker. We have donors flying in from Atlanta. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. Mom, Grant is dying. He is your son-in-law. I know, she said hurriedly. But we cannot just cancel on the donors. Sweetie, it would look unprofessional. We will come next week, Monday or Tuesday, ideally Tuesday. He will not be here on Tuesday. I said, my voice shaking. Well, she sighed, we will do our best. But listen, while I have you on the line, did you call the insurer yet? You know, to verify the claim process? I read that sometimes they deny payout if the notification isn't within 48 hours. I hung up. I did not say goodbye. I just pressed the red button. They were not coming. They were worried about the charity ball and the insurance payout. That was their true shape. I took a breath and texted Brianna. I could not bear to hear her voice, not after finding the fake notary email. But I had to give her the chance. Grant had loved her like a sister once. It is the end. Bree, if you want to see him, come tomorrow morning. The reply came 3 minutes later. Oh, babe, I am sobbing right now. I want to come so bad. But I have a work crisis. That client with the renovation is threatening to sue if I do not show up on site tomorrow at 7 in the morning. I am stuck here. Give him a kiss for me? I will try to swing by this weekend. I looked at the text. Work crisis. She was probably meeting with another notary, or trying to hack into my email again. I put the phone down on the coffee table. I felt a strange sense of calm. It was the calm of the battlefield when you realize no reinforcements are coming. It is just you and the mission. I walked back to the bed. Grant was awake. His eyes were open, staring at the ceiling fan turning slowly above him. They are not coming, he whispered. It was not a question. No, I said, sitting on the edge of the mattress and taking his hand. They are not. He nodded slightly. He did not look sad. He looked relieved. Good, he said. Less noise. He turned his head to look at me. His eyes were sunken, the skin around them dark, but the blue irises were piercing. He squeezed my hand. A weak flutter of pressure. Chloe, he said. The closet. Top shelf. The blue lockbox. I knew the box. It had been up there for years. I thought it held old baseball cards, or maybe his grandfather's watch. Now, I asked. Now, he said. Bring it here. I went to the bedroom closet. I dragged the step stool over and reached for the blue metal box. It was heavy. I carried it back to the living room and set it on the bed next to his legs. Key, he rasped, in my nightstand, taped under the drawer. I found the small silver key. My hands were trembling as I fitted into the lock. I turned it. The lid popped open. Inside, there were no baseball cards. There was a thick stack of documents, organized with the same meticulous precision Grant applied to everything. The house, Grant said. He was struggling for breath, each word costing him something. Look at the deed. I pulled out the document on top. It was the deed to our home. I scanned it. At the bottom, stamped in red ink, was a word I did not expect. Paid. I looked at him. Grant? How? We have 20 years left on the mortgage. He managed a small, crooked smile. The benevolence fund, he whispered. Through the union. When I got sick, Mike filed the paperwork. They paid off $60,000. I used my savings for the rest. Your savings? I asked. But we used your savings for the renovations. Not that savings, he said. The account I had before we met. The one I never told you about. I was saving it for a surprise, a vacation house, or a boat. He coughed, a dry rattling sound. I used it for this. You own the roof. Chloe, no one can kick you out, no matter what happens. Tears streamed down my face. While I was worrying about copays, while I was stressing about electricity bills, he had quietly, secretly secured the biggest asset we owned. He had made sure that if the world fell apart, I would still have 4 walls and a floor. There is more, he said. He pointed a shaking finger at a thick white envelope at the bottom of the box. It was sealed with heavy tape. Take that. I picked it up. It had my name on it in his handwriting. Chloe. Promise me, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper so low I had to lean my ear to his lips. Do not open it now. Open it after the funeral. Alone. No matter who shows up, no matter who is in the house, you go to a room, lock the door, and read it alone. I promise. I sobbed. Grant. I said, why? What is in here? He closed his eyes for a moment. gathering strength. Leverage, he said. And the truth. He opened his eyes again. The intensity in them frightened me. Chloe, listen to me. This is important. Do not let anyone rush you into signing anything, not even if they cry. Not even if they say it is for your own good. Especially not Brianna. Especially not your father. My heart hammered. He knew. He had known all along. I know. I whispered. I know. Grant, I found the emails. I found the fake notary appointment. He looked at me, and a tear leaked from the corner of his eye. I am sorry, he said. I wanted to protect you from knowing. I wanted you to have your parents. I wanted you to have your friend. I do not need them, I said, kissing his forehead. His skin was cool and damp. I have you. You are protecting me right now. Love means I do not leave you unprotected, he said. That is the job. Chloe, that is the only job that matters. He drifted off after that. The effort of speaking had exhausted his remaining reserves. The next 2 days were a blur of morphine doses and silence. I did not sleep. I sat in the chair, holding his hand, watching the rise and fall of his chest. I watched the sun move across the floorboards. I watched the shadows lengthen. I watched the world outside continue to spin while my world ground to a halt. Grant did not wake up again. He fell into a deep coma, his breathing changing rhythm. It became the pattern the nurse had warned me about. Long pauses followed by rapid breaths. The death rattle. It was Sunday morning. The sky outside the window was turning a soft, bruised purple, the color of a sunrise fighting through clouds. I was holding his hand. It felt different now. The muscles were completely slack. The warmth was retreating. I leaned close to his ear. I did not know if he could hear me, but I spoke anyway. It is okay, I said. You can go. The house is paid for. I have the letter. I am ready. You did your job. Grant, you stabilized the scene. You can stand down now. I felt a tiny tremor in his fingers. He took one breath, a long, shuddering inhale that seemed to pull the whole room into his lungs. And then he didn't exhale. I waited. I counted the seconds. 1, 2, 3, 10. I watched his chest. It was still. The silence that followed was not like any silence I had ever heard. It was not just the absence of noise. It was a physical weight. It slammed into the room like a sudden change in pressure. It felt like a door closing, a heavy steel door locking shut on the world I knew, the world where I was a wife, the world where I was safe. I did not scream. I did not wail. I just sat there in the gray light of dawn, holding the hand of the man who had changed my tire in the rain. I looked at the blue lockbox on the bed. I looked at the sealed letter. Okay. I whispered to the silence. I am alone. I stood up. I kissed his forehead one last time. I walked to the window and looked out at the street. The paperboy was throwing a newspaper onto the driveway. A neighbor was walking a dog. They did not know that the best man in the world had just left it. I went to the phone. I did not call my mother. I did not call Brianna. I called Mr. Henderson at the funeral home. It is time, I said. Then I sat back down in the chair, picked up the sealed letter, and placed it on my lap. I sat guard over his body. The time for crying was over. The time for fighting was about to begin. I had arranged the chairs myself. 2 days before the service, I had gone to the funeral home and physically placed the 3 white folding chairs in the front row. I had measured the distance between them. I had placed the reserved signs with my own hands, smoothing the cardstock, making sure they were perfectly centered. It was a pathetic act of hope, even after the missing money, the fake notary appointment, and the text messages about Plan B. A stupid, childish part of me still wanted to be wrong. I wanted to look up as the hearse arrived and see my mother's Lincoln Navigator pulling into the lot. I wanted to see Brianna running across the grass in her high heels, breathless and apologetic, hugging me and proving that my paranoia was just grief poisoning my brain. But as the clock ticked past 11 in the morning, the heat rising off the Tennessee asphalt, those chairs remained empty. They were not just furniture. They were a statement. They were a gap in the line of defense that everyone could see. The service itself was a blur of navy blue. Grant's coworkers had arrived in force. They stood in formation, a wall of pressed uniforms and polished badges, creating a perimeter around the grave. They were the family I had inherited by marriage, the men and women who had shared lukewarm coffee and trauma with my husband for a decade. They did not ask where my parents were. They knew. Paramedics are trained to read a scene, and they had read this one the moment they walked up. I sat in the front row, alone. The sun beat down on my black dress. I could feel the sweat trickling down my spine. The excuses had already landed on my phone. Silent little bombs detonating in my pocket. My mother's voicemail about car trouble. Brianna's text about a work emergency. I did not check them again. I did not need to. The silence from the 3 chairs to my right screamed louder than any notification. I could hear the murmurs behind me. A small-town funeral is a social audit. Everyone is counting. Everyone is assessing the turnout to measure the worth of the deceased and the standing of the survivors. "Where are they?" a voice whispered. Carrying on the wind. It sounded like Mrs. Gable, the town librarian. That is her mother's seat. Is she sick? I heard they are at a charity thing in Atlanta. Can you imagine? And the friend? The blonde one? She is not here either? God, she is completely alone. The words washed over me, stinging like nettles. It was a specific kind of humiliation. It was the public confirmation that I was not worth the effort of a drive. I was not worth canceling a meeting. I was not worth missing a cocktail party, but I was not completely alone. Caleb Wynn stood just behind my right shoulder. He had introduced himself before the service, handing me the flag patch, but he had not retreated to the back of the crowd. He stayed close. He was a large man, rough-hewn, smelling of tobacco and old leather, and he radiated a kind of dangerous calm that kept the curious onlookers at bay. When the service ended and people began to crowd forward, offering their platitudes and casseroles, Caleb stepped in. He did not say much. He just used his body as a barrier. "Give her a minute," he would say, his voice low and gravelly. "Back up a step. Folks, let her breathe." He deflected the questions I could not answer. When Mrs. Gable asked, with wide, pitying eyes, if my parents were terribly heartbroken to miss it, Caleb answered for me. "They are where they need to be," he said, his tone flat. "And we are here." It was a non-answer that shut the conversation down instantly. Eventually, the crowd thinned. The navy blue wall of paramedics saluted one last time and filed out to their personal vehicles. The graveyard grew quiet. Save for the sound of the wind in the cedars and the distant hum of the highway, I stood up. My legs felt heavy, like they were filled with lead shot. Mr. Henderson, the funeral director, approached me. He looked more nervous than he had earlier. He was wringing his hands, a habit that made him look guilty of something. "Mrs. Wynn?" he said softly. "The car is ready to take you home whenever you are." "Thank you," I said. "I am ready." He hesitated. He looked at Caleb, then back at me. "There is one other thing. I mentioned earlier that we had a call about the certificates, about the bulk order. I remember. I said, the memory of it made my stomach tighten. 10 copies. Urgently needed." "Well, mister," Henderson said, lowering his voice even further. I checked the call log again. I wanted to be sure before I mentioned it. The caller. They did not just ask for certificates. They tried to update the file. I frowned. Update the file? What do you mean? They tried to change the authorized representative on your husband's paperwork. He said, they wanted to remove you as the primary contact for the document release and replace it with a Diane Green. They claimed you were incapacitated by grief. The world tilted on its axis. It was not just about getting a death certificate to cash a policy. It was a coup. They had tried to legally sideline me before the funeral even started. They had tried to tell the state of Tennessee that I was too broken to handle my own husband's death, so that they could intercept the paperwork. If Mr. Henderson had been less diligent, or if he had just been a busy man trying to be helpful, he might have done it. They might have walked away with the keys to Grant's estate before I even left the cemetery. I felt a coldness spread through me that had nothing to do with the grave. It was a numbness. It was the death of the last tiny, lingering shred of denial. "Did you do it?" I asked. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Calm, detached, like I was ordering a sandwich. "Absolutely not, Mr. Henderson said, looking horrified. I told them that without a court order, the spouse is the only authority. They got quite aggressive. Actually, but I refused. "Thank you, Mr. Henderson." I said, "You did the right thing." I turned to Caleb. He was watching me, his dark eyes unreadable. "You knew." I said, "Grant told you?" Caleb nodded once. He said they were vultures. He said they would pick the bones before the body was cold. He was right. I said, the drive home was silent. When the limousine pulled into my driveway, the house looked different. It was no longer the home I had shared with Grant. It was a fortress I had to defend. Caleb walked me to the door. "I am staying at the Motel 6 on the highway," he said. "Room 112. If they show up, if you need anything, you call me. Grant made me promise. I will." I said, and I meant it. I walked inside. The house was empty. The hospital bed was gone. The medical supply company had collected it yesterday. The living room looked vast and hollow. I locked the door. I engaged the deadbolt. I checked the back door. I checked the windows. I went to the kitchen and poured a glass of water. My hands were steady now. The shaking had stopped. I waited until the sun went down. I waited until the house was wrapped in darkness, the only light coming from the lamp on the desk. Then, I sat down and pulled the sealed envelope out of my purse. The tape was heavy-duty. Grant had sealed it like evidence. I used a letter opener to slice through it. Inside, there was a single sheet of yellow legal pad paper, covered in Grant's handwriting, and a thick blue folder. I picked up the letter first. "Chloe, if you are reading this, the hard part is over. The funeral is done. You survived it. I am sorry I could not tell you everything while I was here. I tried, but I saw how much you wanted to believe in them. You wanted your mom to be a mom. You wanted Brianna to be a sister. I could not take that hope away from you while I was dying. I needed you to have it until the very end, but I could not leave you blind. I hired a man 3 months ago. His name is Leighton Park. He is a forensic accountant and a private investigator. I paid him out of the secret savings. What is in the blue folder is the truth. It is not gossip. It is math. And math does not lie. They are going to come for you. Chloe, they are going to tell you that you are weak. They are going to tell you that you are confused. They are going to try to take the house, the insurance, and the life we built. Use the folder. I love you. Now fight back." I put the letter down. My heart was pounding a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I opened the blue folder. It was not a collection of love notes. It was a dossier. The first page was a credit report, not mine, Brianna's. It was a disaster. Maxed out credit cards, a defaulted business loan for Raina Styles Interiors, a pending lawsuit from a vendor for $20,000. She was drowning. She was not the successful designer she pretended to be. She was broke, and she was desperate. The second page was a transcript of text messages. Leighton Park, the investigator, had seemingly accessed something deep. Date, September 4th. From Brianna Hale. To Diane Green. Brianna, he is still hanging on. It is taking too long. I have the balloon payment due on the 15th. Diane, just keep her calm. Get the access codes. Once he is gone, we can liquidate the portfolio. I will cover your debt if you get me the power of attorney. I gasped. The air left the room. My mother, my own mother, was bargaining with my best friend to strip mine my life. She was offering to pay off Brianna's debts in exchange for help stealing my inheritance. I turned the page. There were photos, grainy, long-lens photos. One showed my father, Martin, meeting with a real estate agent at a coffee shop. I recognized the agent. She was known for quick cash sales of distressed properties. The date on the photo was 2 weeks ago. My father was already planning to sell my house. He was already negotiating the commission. There was a log of IP addresses. It showed the login attempts to my bank account. They matched the IP address of Brianna's home Wi-Fi. There was a copy of the fake notary seal they had used for the document I found. It was a forgery, traced back to a shady online service. Grant had known everything. He had lain in that hospital bed, smiling at them, letting them eat his food, letting them pretend to care. All while he was gathering the nails for their coffins. He had not just investigated, he had built a trap. I looked at the last document in the folder. It was a letter from a law firm I did not recognize. To Mrs. Chloe Wynn. The Grant Wynn Trust. Dear Mrs. Wynn, please be advised that upon the death of Grant Wynn, all assets including the life insurance policy, number 4490, and the deed to the property at 12 Oak Street have been automatically transferred into the irrevocable Grant Wynn Trust. You are the sole beneficiary. The trust contains a specific clause. No funds may be disbursed to or managed by any party related to the beneficiary by blood or marriage, specifically naming Diane Green, Martin Green, and Brianna Hale. I put the paper down. He had locked them out. He had created a legal vault that they could bang on for 100 years and never crack. I sat back in the chair. The tears finally came, but they were not tears of grief. They were tears of awe. He had loved me enough to let me be naive while he was alive, but he loved me too much to let me be a victim after he was gone. I looked at the phone. It was silent. I knew they would be coming soon. They would give me a day, maybe 2, to recover, and then they would descend. They would bring casseroles and sympathy and paperwork. They would think I was the same Chloe who cried over a flat tire. I closed the blue folder. I ran my hand over the cover. I stood up and walked to the window. The street was dark. The world was asleep. Come on, then. I whispered to the darkness. Come and try. I was not just a widow anymore. I was the executioner. And Grant had just handed me the axe. It was exactly 7 days after the funeral when they arrived. They came in a pack, like wolves who had agreed on a hunting strategy beforehand. I was in the kitchen, drinking tea and watching the driveway through the blinds. I had been watching the driveway for a week, waiting for this moment. Grant's warning echoed in my head. They will give you a week, then they will come for the kill. At 10 in the morning, my father's silver sedan pulled in, followed closely by Brianna's convertible. They parked side by side, blocking the exit. They got out of their cars with a synchronized heaviness, adjusting their clothes, checking their reflections in the windows. I unlocked the front door and waited. When they knocked, it was a soft, tentative rap, the kind of knock that says, "We are gentle, we are harmless." I opened the door. They were standing there, a tableau of performed grief. My mother, Diane, was holding a ceramic dish covered in aluminum foil, the universal currency of apology. My father, Martin, wore a somber sweater and held a bouquet of lilies that looked like they had been bought at a gas station. Brianna stood slightly behind them, clutching a thick leather portfolio to her chest, wearing oversized sunglasses that she slowly removed to reveal eyes that looked practiced in sadness. "Chloe," my mother breathed, her voice trembling. "Oh, my poor baby." She lunged forward to hug me. I did not step back. I did not flinch. I simply held up a hand, palm out, stopping her chest high. "No," I said. My voice was not loud, but it was absolute. No hugging today. My mother stopped, blinking. The rejection didn't fit her script. She looked at my father, confused. We wanted to bring you dinner," she stammered, lifting the heavy dish. "It is lasagna, your favorite. We have been so worried about you." "Sweetie," the silence, "it is not good for you." "Come in," I said, stepping aside. "Put the food in the kitchen." I watched them file past me. They walked differently than they usually did. Usually, my father walked like he owned the place, and Brianna walked like she was on a runway. Today, they walked on tiptoe, treating the house like a museum of tragedy. It was a performance designed to make me feel fragile. I led them to the dining room. I did not offer them coffee. I did not offer them water. I sat at the head of the table, Grant's seat, and gestured for them to sit. They arranged themselves. Diane and Martin on one side, Brianna on the other. I was the focal point. It felt less like a family visit and more like a board meeting where the CEO is about to be fired. "So," I said, folding my hands on the table, "you are here. Tell me why you really came." My father cleared his throat. He looked around the room, his eyes scanning the walls, the ceiling, checking for cracks or leaks. He was appraising the asset. "Chloe, honey," he started, using his business dad voice, deep, reasonable, patronizing. "We are here because we love you, and because we are concerned. You have been isolated here for a week. No calls, no texts. We know you are grieving, but life has to go on. There are practicalities." "Practicalities," I repeated. "Exactly," he said, leaning forward. "Look, I have been watching the real estate trends in Cedar Hollow. The market is shifting. Chloe, it is volatile. This house, it is a lot for a single woman to manage. The maintenance, the taxes. It is a burden you do not need right now." He paused, waiting for me to nod. I did not nod. I spoke to a colleague. He continued. "Faster now. We can list it quietly, off market. I can get you a cash offer within 48 hours. Get you out from under this mortgage before the values drop. You could walk away clean. Clean," I said. "You want me to sell the house. 1 week after my husband died in it. It is for your financial security." He insisted, his face reddening slightly. "You cannot afford this place alone. Chloe, we all know that. Grant was, well, he was the primary earner, wasn't he? He didn't know the house was paid off. He didn't know about the trust. He thought I was drowning in a mortgage I couldn't pay." My mother reached across the table, trying to touch my hand. I pulled it back. "And then you come home," she said, her voice dripping with syrup. "Your room is ready. Sweetie, we painted it that soft yellow you used to like. You need to be somewhere safe. Until you are stable." "Stable?" I looked at her. "Am I unstable?" "Mother?" "You are grieving," she said, her eyes widening. "You are in shock. You cannot be expected to make decisions. You need to be taken care of, just for a few months, or a year, until you get back on your feet." It was a masterful pincer movement. Father takes the house, mother takes the body. They strip me of my independence and my asset in one conversation, framing it as a rescue mission. I looked at Brianna. She had been quiet, watching the exchange, her fingers drumming on the leather portfolio. "And you, Bri?" I asked. "What is your part in the rescue mission?" She offered a sad, tight smile. "I am just here to help with the messy stuff. Babe, the paperwork. I know how much you hate numbers." She slid the leather portfolio across the polished wood of the table. It stopped right in front of me. "I had my accountant look over some things," she said casually. "Standard stuff for widows. Consolidating accounts, protecting you from creditors. It is just a financial planning framework. We set up a management structure so you do not have to worry about bills for the next 6 months." Diane and Martin agreed to oversee it. I opened the folder. On top was a document titled Durable General Power of Attorney. It was thick, comprehensive. It gave the designated agents, Brianna Hale and Diane Green, the power to access bank accounts, sell real estate, liquidate investments, and manage all legal affairs. Clipped to the top of the document was a small white business card, Lila Evans, Mobile Notary Public, and handwritten on the card in blue ink, "Appointment, today, 2:30 in the afternoon." I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 2:15. "You scheduled a notary," I said, looking up at them, "for today, before you even asked me." Brianna shrugged, acting like it was a favor. "We wanted to make it easy for you. Chloe, she is waiting in her car down the street. We can just wave her in. You sign a few pages, and then it is done. You do not have to think about money again. We handle the mess. You just heal." The arrogance of it took my breath away. They had brought the notary with them. They were so certain of my weakness, so certain of my collapse. that they had pre-booked the execution. I am not signing this. I said. I closed the folder. The room went silent. The air pressure dropped. Chloe, my father said, his voice losing its warmth. Don't be difficult. This is standard procedure. It is not standard for me to give you control of my life. I said, I am 31 years old. I have a job. I can pay my own bills. You have a job as a receptionist, Brianna said, her tone sharpening. And you have debt. Chloe, we know about the medical bills. We know Grant didn't leave you a fortune. We are trying to stop you from going bankrupt. I am not going bankrupt. I said, you are in denial, my mother cried out. Tears began to spill down her cheeks, real, wet tears. Oh, Martin, look at her. She is not herself. She is manic. This is what the doctor warned us about. The shock is making her irrational. She turned to me, her face contorted with a mix of anger and performance. How can you be so selfish? We are trying to save you. You are going to lose this house anyway. Why not let your father handle it so you get something out of it? Why do you have to fight us? Because I am not a child, I said, my voice rising. And I am not unstable. I am just awake. Martin stood up. He slammed his hand on the table. The sound echoed like a gunshot. That is enough, he barked. You listen to me, young lady. You are going to sign those papers. We are your family. We know what is best. You are emotional. You are exhausted. And you are making a mistake that will ruin your future. I will not watch you destroy your life out of spite. Spite? I asked. Is it spite to want to keep my own home? It is stubbornness. He shouted. It is ingratitude. After everything we have done? After we came here today? After Brianna went out of her way to arrange the legal protection? Brianna leaned forward, her voice dropping to that smooth, gaslighting whisper she used so well. Chloe, look at me, she said. Look at me. You are confused. It is the grief fog. Remember the money you lost? Remember the check you couldn't find? You are forgetting things. You are losing time. You are not capable of managing this right now. If you do not sign this, and you make a mistake with the insurance or the mortgage, you could lose everything. Is that what Grant would want? She used his name. She dared to use his name. Grant would want you to be safe, she continued, her eyes wide and pleading. He would want us to step in. Please, babe, just sign it. Let us take the weight off. I looked at them. My father, red-faced and imposing. My mother, weeping into a tissue, playing the victim. Brianna, staring at me with the predatory patience of a snake. They were squeezing me. They were using every trigger they had installed in me since childhood. Fear of authority, guilt over my mother's emotions, doubt in my own competence. But they had made a mistake. They thought they were pressing on a bruise. They did not realize they were pressing on a callus. I stood up slowly. I picked up the folder and dropped it on the floor. I have a question, I said. My voice was very quiet. They stopped. The interruption threw them off rhythm. What? My father snapped. I looked at him, then at my mother, and finally at Brianna. I held her gaze. Before we discuss the house, I said, and before we discuss my mental state, and before I sign a single piece of paper, I took a breath. I want you to explain why someone called the funeral home for death certificates before the service even started. The silence that followed was instant and absolute. Brianna's mouth opened slightly, then closed. My mother stopped crying mid-sob. She froze, the tissue halfway to her nose. My father blinked, his aggressive stance faltering. What are you talking about? Mr. Henderson told me, I said, keeping my eyes on Brianna. On the morning of the funeral, at 8 o'clock, someone called. They asked for 10 certified copies in bulk, and they tried to change the authorized representative on the file to Diane Green. I turned to my mother. You were supposed to be stuck on the highway with car trouble. Mom, remember? You left me a voicemail. So how did you manage to call the funeral director and demand legal documents while you were waiting for a tow truck? My mother's face went pale. She looked at Brianna. It was a fast, panicked glance, but I saw it. I never, she stammered. That must be a mistake. A clerical error. It was not an error, I said. Mr. Henderson was very clear. He refused the request. He told you that only the spouse has authority. I turned back to Brianna. And you? You had a work emergency. You were heartbroken. Yet you knew about the certificates. You texted my mother about Plan B when that didn't work. Brianna went still. Her face hardened. The mask of the concerned best friend evaporated, revealing something cold and sharp underneath. You are checking my texts? She asked, her voice low. I am checking everything. I said, I know about the notary appointment today. I know about the one you tried to fake last week. I know about the loan that never arrived. I placed my hands on the table and leaned in. You did not come here to help me. I said, you came here because the first attempt failed. You came here because you are broke, Brianna, and because you promised my parents a cut if you got me to sign. My father looked at Brianna, then at me. He looked suddenly older. Chloe, that is paranoid nonsense. Is it? I asked. Then why is the notary waiting down the street? Why is the date on that folder today? I pointed to the door. Get out, Chloe. Be reasonable. My mother wailed, reaching for me again. Get out, I screamed. It was the first time I had raised my voice. It ripped through the house. A raw, animal sound of fury. Get out of my house! Take your lasagna and your fake tears and get out! My father stared at me. He saw something in my face he had never seen before. He saw that his daughter was gone, and someone else was standing there. You are making a mistake, he said coldly. You will come crawling back when the bank takes the keys. Let them try. I said. Brianna stood up. She grabbed her purse. She did not look at me. She walked to the door, her heels clicking on the hardwood. A sharp, retreating rhythm. My parents followed her. My mother still sobbing. My father muttering about ingratitude. I slammed the door behind them. I locked the deadbolt. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the door. My heart was racing, but my hands were steady. I had done it. I had faced the wolves, and I had not flinched. But I knew this was not the end. This was just the skirmish. They would regroup. They would lawyer up. They would try to declare me incompetent. I walked back to the dining room table. I looked at the leather folder lying on the floor. I picked it up. I took out the business card for the notary. Lila Evans. I put the card in my pocket. I would need that for the police report. I went to the blue folder, Grant's folder, which was hidden in the pantry inside a cereal box. I pulled it out. Phase 1 complete. I whispered, now it was time for Phase 2. I invited them back 3 days later. It was a calculated move. After I had kicked them out, they had bombarded my phone with threats disguised as medical concerns. My father had left a voicemail stating that if I did not agree to a voluntary family intervention regarding the estate, he would petition the court for an emergency competency hearing. He used words like psychotic break and unfit. They thought they were cornering me. They thought I was sitting in the dark, chewing my fingernails. Terrified of their power, they did not know that for the last 72 hours, I had not been grieving. I had been preparing. I told them to come at 4 o'clock on Friday. I told them I was ready to listen. I told them I was ready to put everything on the table. When they walked in, the dynamic had shifted. They were no longer tiptoeing. They were strutting. They believed I had broken. My mother, Diane, wore a suit, as if she were coming to close a business deal. My father, Martin, carried a briefcase. Brianna wore black, but her lips were painted a bright, aggressive red. I did not offer them seats this time. I stood at the head of the dining room table. The surface was bare, except for one thing. Grant's blue folder. Thank you for being sensible. Chloe, my father said, setting his briefcase down, I'm glad you finally saw reason. We have the papers ready again. We can put this ugly episode behind us. We are not signing papers today. Dad, I said. My voice was even. It lacked the tremor it had possessed a week ago. Then why are we here? Brianna asked. Checking her watch. I pushed a client meeting for this. We are here to review the accounting. I said, I promise to put everything on the table. So, let us begin. I opened the blue folder. I took out the first stack of papers and fanned them out across the mahogany table like a blackjack dealer revealing a winning hand. "What is this?" my mother asked, squinting at the documents. "These," I said, pointing to the first sheet, "are the access logs for the joint checking account at First National. You see those highlighted rows? Those are login attempts from an IP address in River Heights, specifically from a connection registered to Raina Styles Interiors." I looked at Brianna. Her face did not move, but her eyes flickered. It was a tiny, involuntary twitch, the biological reaction to being caught. "And these," I continued, sliding the next sheet forward, "are the withdrawal requests. $2,500, attempted 3 times, denied twice, pending once, initiated from the mobile app on a device labeled Brianna's iPhone 14 Pro." Brianna laughed. It was a sharp, brittle sound. "Chloe, honestly, we talked about this. You are confused. You probably used my phone to log in and forgot. I thought you might say that." I said, "Which is why I have this." I laid down the screenshots. They were blown up, printed on high-quality photo paper. They were the text messages between Brianna and my mother. Date: September 4th. Sender: Brianna. Message: "She is cracking. I think we can pivot to Plan B by Friday." Date: September 10th. Sender: Diane. Message: "Just keep her calm. Get the access codes. Once he is gone, we can liquidate the portfolio." The silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of a vacuum. My mother picked up the photo. Her hand was shaking so badly the paper rattled against the table surface. This is illegal," my mother whispered. "You hacked my phone." "I did not hack anything." I said, "Grant hired a forensic investigator 3 months ago. His name is Leighton Park. He specializes in elder financial abuse and fraud. He has been monitoring the network traffic and digital footprints surrounding this house since Grant got his diagnosis." I looked at them. Grant knew. "He watched you plotting to rob his widow while he was dying in the next room." Brianna's face changed. It was fascinating to watch. The mask of the concerned best friend did not just slip, it disintegrated. Her features sharpened. Her mouth twisted into a sneer. She looked at the papers, then at me, and I saw the calculation happening behind her eyes. She was assessing the damage. She was looking for an exit. "This is ridiculous," Diane said, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. "We were planning for your future. Liquidate the portfolio just meant simplifying your assets. We were trying to guide you. You are too emotional to understand complex finance." "Chloe, you always have been." "Just planning?" I asked. "Is that what you call it?" "Yes," she insisted. "We are your parents. We have a right to discuss how to help you." "Help me?" I picked up another document. "Is that why Dad met with the We Buy Ugly Houses agent 2 weeks before the funeral? Is that why he negotiated a 15% commission on a quick sale of my home?" I slid the photo of Martin and the real estate agent across the table. My father's face turned a deep, mottled purple. He did not look at the photo. He looked at me, and his eyes were full of hate. "Grant did this." He spat. "That paranoid, blue-collar nobody. He poisoned you against us. He spent his dying breath turning our daughter into a conspiracy theorist. Grant protected me." I said, "He was a nobody with a hero complex," Martin shouted, slamming his fist onto the table. "He drove an ambulance. Chloe!" He was a glorified taxi driver who thought he was smarter than us. He knew he could not provide for you. So he made up this story about us being villains to make himself look big, and you fell for it. You are letting a dead man destroy your family. Grant provided for me better than you ever did," I said coldly. "And since you brought up provision, let us talk about the life insurance." I saw their ears perk up, even in their anger. The mention of money drew them in like moths to a flame. "You want to know about the policy?" I said. "Policy number 4490, $500,000. Brianna leaned forward slightly. My mother stopped hyperventilating. "I have the policy details right here," I said, placing a thick document on the table. "But there is a catch. Grant did not leave it to me directly. He knew that if the money hit my personal account, You would guilt me into loaning it to you. You would bully me until I signed it over for safekeeping. I opened the document to the third page, so he put it in a trust. I said, "The Grant Wynn Irrevocable Trust. The beneficiary is Chloe Wynn. But the trustee? The trustee is a corporate fiduciary appointed by the law firm of Bennett and Strong. And the trust documents have a very specific clause. I read from the page, no distributions shall be made to, or for the benefit of, any party related to the beneficiary by blood or marriage, specifically excluding Diane Green, Martin Green, and Brianna Hale. Furthermore, any attempt by said parties to petition for guardianship or control of the beneficiary shall result in the immediate freezing of all assets and the redirection of funds to the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation." I looked up. Do you understand what that means? It means you cannot touch a dime. If you try to declare me incompetent, the money disappears. If you try to sue me, the money disappears. If you ask me for a loan, the trustee will deny it. My father stared at the paper. His mouth hung open. The vein in his forehead was throbbing. He had been outmaneuvered by the nobody he despised. Grant had not just built a wall. He had rigged it with explosives. You ungrateful little—" My father sputtered. "I am not done." I interrupted. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I connected it to the Bluetooth speaker that sat on the sidebar. The same speaker we used to play jazz during dinner parties. "There is one last thing," I said. "You said I was confused, Brianna. You said I was imagining things. You said I blamed you because of grief." I tapped the screen. This was recorded on the living room security hub. Grant installed it inside the bookshelf 3 years ago. It has a very sensitive microphone. I pressed play. The audio was crisp. It filled the room. Sound of footsteps. Brianna's voice. "She is not thinking clearly. She is a mess. We need her to sign before it is too late. If he dies before we get the power of attorney transferred, it goes to probate. Diane, we lose control." I let it play. Sound of wind. Brianna's voice. "I need that commission. Diane, I have the balloon payment on the business loan. You promised me 10% of the estate if I got her to sign." Diane's voice, over the phone. "I will cover your debt. Brianna, just get the signature. Use the grief. Tell her she is forgetting things. Make her doubt her memory." I hit pause. The silence this time was heavy, suffocating. It was the sound of a guillotine blade hanging in the air. I looked at Brianna. She was pale. Her red lipstick looked like a wound on her face. She was not looking at me. She was looking at my mother. "You recorded me?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Grant recorded you," I corrected. Brianna stood up. Her hands were shaking. She looked at Diane with wild, panicked eyes. "You said it was safe," Brianna hissed at my mother. "You said she was stupid. You said she wouldn't notice." "Shut up, Brianna," my father snapped. "No, I will not shut up," Brianna screamed. She turned to me, the tears finally real, born of pure terror. "Chloe, listen to me. I am drowning. I owe $80,000 to a lender who is not a bank. They are going to take my car. They are going to take my business. Your mother. She came to me. She told me Grant had a secret policy. She told me that if I helped them get control of the house and the insurance, they would give me a cut. I was desperate. Chloe, I didn't want to hurt you. I just needed the money. You gaslit me. I said, you told me I was crazy. You stole cash from my counter. You tried to make me believe I was losing my memory while my husband was dying. I am sorry," she sobbed. "I am so sorry." "Save it," I said. I looked at my parents. My mother was refusing to make eye contact. My father was staring at the wall, his jaw set in a line of granite stubbornness. "I have already filed a report with the Cedar Hollow Police Department," I said, "for identity theft, for fraud, for the forged notary documents, and for the theft of the benefits check." My mother gasped. "You called the police on your own family?" "I called the police on criminals." I said, "I gave them copies of everything you see on this table. I gave them the audio recording. Detective Miller is very interested in the part about the conspiracy to commit fraud. I walked to the front door and opened it wide. The afternoon sun poured in, bright and harsh. "Leave," I said. "Chloe, you cannot do this," my father said. Standing up, he tried to muster his old authority, but he looked small. "We are your parents. You are going to send us to jail? Over money?" "Not over money," I said. "Over Grant. You disrespected him in life, and you tried to rob him in death. That is unforgivable. If you walk out that door," my father threatened, pointing a shaking finger at me, "you are dead to us. Do not call us when you are lonely. Do not call us when you fail." "I will not call you," I said, "but my lawyer might. His name is Mr. Vance. You will be hearing from him regarding the restraining order. If any of you step foot on this property, or contact me, or try to access any account with my name on it, you will be arrested." Brianna was the first to move. She ran out the door, clutching her purse, sobbing. She did not look back. My parents followed. My mother paused at the threshold, looking at me with a mix of fear and confusion, as if she still could not understand how her obedient doll had come to life. "We loved you," she whispered. "No." I said, "You loved what I could do for you. There is a difference." I watched them walk to their cars. My father slammed his door so hard the vehicle shook. My mother got in and covered her face with her hands. I watched them reverse out of the driveway. I watched them drive away down the street, past the neighbors' houses, past the oak trees, disappearing around the corner. I stood there for a long time. The house was quiet. The folder lay open on the dining room table. The evidence of their betrayal was spread out in black and white. But for the first time in months, the air in the house felt clean. I closed the door. I locked it. I walked back to the table and gathered the papers. I put them back in the blue folder. I patted the cover. "Got them. Grant," I whispered. "Checkmate." Phase 2 was complete, but I was not done yet. I had stopped the bleeding, but I still had to heal the wound, and I knew exactly how I was going to do it. I thought the war was over when I kicked them out of my house. I thought the shame of being exposed, the audio recording of their conspiracy, and the threat of police involvement would send them scurrying back to their holes. I was wrong. I had underestimated the desperation of people who believe they are entitled to money they did not earn. 2 weeks after the confrontation in my dining room, a process server knocked on my door. He was a young man, chewing gum, looking bored. He handed me a thick envelope and walked away before I could even ask a question. I stood on the porch and opened it. The legal language was dense, but the meaning was clear enough to stop my heart. Petition for emergency guardianship. Petitioner: Martin Green and Diane Green. Respondent: Chloe Wynn. Allegation: mental incapacitation. Due to pathological grief and paranoia. They were doubling down. They were telling the state of Tennessee that I was insane. They claimed I was hallucinating conspiracies, alienating family support, and squandering assets. They claimed I was a danger to myself and my estate. They were asking the court to grant them immediate control over my finances and my medical decisions for my own protection. I did not cry. I did not panic. I walked into the kitchen, picked up the phone, and called the number Grant had left for me. "Mr. Vance," I said when the attorney answered. They pulled the trigger. "I know." "Mr. Vance said. His voice was calm, the voice of a man who had seen this move 100 times. "Leighton and I have been waiting for this. Do not worry. Mrs. Wynn." They just walked into a buzzsaw. The hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday. It was held in a small probate courtroom that smelled of floor wax and old paper. My parents arrived early. They were wearing their concerned parents' costumes again. My mother wore a modest gray suit and no jewelry. My father looked grave and weary. Brianna was there too, sitting in the back, looking like a cornered animal. She had been subpoenaed. When I walked in, I was not alone. Flanking me were Mr. Vance, my attorney, and Leighton Park, the forensic accountant Grant had hired, and walking right behind me, like a bodyguard, was Caleb Wynn. My father's eyes narrowed when he saw Caleb. He leaned over and whispered something to their lawyer, a slick-looking man who seemed to be charging them by the minute. The hearing began. Their lawyer painted a tragic picture. He spoke of a daughter unhinged by the sudden loss of her husband. He spoke of my refusal to accept loving family support. He claimed I was inventing wild stories about theft to cope with the trauma. "Your Honor," their lawyer said, gesturing to my parents, "Mr. and Mrs. Green are heartbroken. They only want to ensure their daughter does not lose her home and her future during this psychotic break. They are willing to take on the burden of managing her estate until she recovers." My mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. It was a good performance. Then it was our turn. "Mr. Vance stood up. He did not make a speech. He simply approached the bench with a stack of documents. "Your Honor," Mr. Vance said, "the defense asserts that this petition is not an act of concern, but an act of retaliation. We can prove that the petitioners have engaged in a systematic attempt to defraud the respondent, beginning before the husband was even deceased." The judge, a stern woman with reading glasses perched on the end of her nose, looked over the paperwork. "Proceed," she said. "We laid it out. We did not use emotion. We used math. We used timestamps." Leighton Park took the stand. He projected a timeline onto the screen. Exhibit A. Leighton said, "Call logs from the morning of the funeral. 8:02 in the morning. A call placed from Diane Green's cell phone to the Ridgeview Funeral Home, requesting 10 death certificates and attempting to change the authorized next of kin. This was at the exact same time Mrs. Green left a voicemail claiming she was stranded on the highway." The judge looked at my mother. My mother looked at her lap. Exhibit B. Leighton continued. Text messages recovered from Brianna Hale's phone, communicating with Diane Green, discussions of Plan B and promises of debt repayment in exchange for access to the estate. Exhibit C. Leighton said, pointing to a new document, a forensic analysis of the loan transfer. The $2,500 that Mrs. Hale claimed to send was never initiated. However, a withdrawal request for that exact amount was attempted from Mrs. Wynn's account using Mrs. Hale's device ID. The air in the room shifted. The concerned parent's narrative was dissolving under the weight of hard data. Then we called Caleb Wynn. Caleb walked to the stand. He looked out of place in the courtroom, big and rough in his work clothes. But he held his head high. "Mr. Wynn," Mr. Vance asked, "did your cousin, Grant Wynn, ever speak to you about his wife's family?" "He did," Caleb said. His voice rumbled through the room. "About 6 months ago, right after he got the diagnosis." "What did he say?" Caleb looked directly at my father. "He told me that they were sharks. He told me that they had never respected him, and that the moment he was gone, they would try to eat Chloe alive. He said they would try to say she was crazy so they could get the keys to the house. He asked me to stand guard. He said, 'Caleb, do not let them rewrite the story.'" My father turned a shade of crimson. He started to stand up. "Objection!" he shouted. "This is hearsay. It is a sworn affidavit." "Mr. Vance corrected, holding up a notarized document signed by Grant 3 months before he died. Grant Wynn put his concerns in writing. He predicted this exact scenario. He explicitly stated that any attempt by Martin or Diane Green to seek guardianship should be treated as a hostile act of greed. The judge took the document. She read it in silence. The room was so quiet, I could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Then came the twist. Mr. Vance turned his attention to Brianna, who was sitting in the witness chair, looking like she wanted to vomit. "Miss Hale," Mr. Vance said, "we have records showing that your interior design business is currently facing 3 separate lawsuits for breach of contract and unpaid debts totaling $85,000. Is that correct?" Brianna swallowed hard. I am restructuring. We also have an audio recording," Mr. Vance said, "in which you admit that Diane Green promised to cover your debts if you secured Mrs. Wynn's signature on a power of attorney." Brianna looked at the judge, then at my parents. She saw the ship going down, and she decided not to drown with it. "She made me do it!" Brianna blurted out, pointing a shaking finger at my mother. Diane told me they were going to cut Chloe off anyway. She said if I didn't help them, I would get nothing. I was desperate. They told me Grant stole money from them years ago and they were just getting it back. I didn't know they were lying. My mother gasped. "You little liar," she shrieked. Jumping up, "We never said that." "Order!" The judge slammed her gavel. "Order in this court." But the damage was done. The pack had turned on itself. The judge looked at my parents with an expression of pure disgust. She took off her glasses and set them on the bench. "I have heard enough," she said. "The petition for guardianship is dismissed with prejudice." She ruled, "There is absolutely no evidence that Mrs. Wynne is incapacitated. There is, however, overwhelming evidence that the petitioners have engaged in a conspiracy to defraud a grieving widow." She looked at my father. "Mr. Green, you should be ashamed. You filed a motion claiming your daughter was mentally unwell because she refused to let you rob her." The judge turned to the clerk. "I am ordering a full forensic audit of any funds that may have been accessed. I am granting the restraining order requested by Mrs. Wynne, Mr. and Mrs. Green, and Miss Hale. You are to have no contact with the respondent. If you step foot on her property, you will be arrested." She banged the gavel. Case closed. I stood up. I felt light. The heavy cloak of fear that had been draped over me for months finally slid off. I walked out of the courtroom. My parents were arguing with their lawyer in the corner. Brianna was crying into her hands. They did not look at me. They knew, finally, that I was unreachable. Caleb walked beside me down the hallway. He would have liked that, Caleb said, a small smile touching his lips. He would have liked seeing them sweat. He did see it, I said, touching the locket I wore around my neck, the one with Grant's picture. He wrote the script. I walked out of the courthouse into the bright afternoon sun. The air tasted sweet. It tasted like freedom. I did not go back to my parents' house. I did not go to Brianna's for a debrief. I drove home, to my house. I walked inside. It was quiet, but it was not lonely. It was peaceful. I looked at the walls Grant and I had painted. I looked at the porch where we had planned to grow old. My father had told me to sell it. He said it was a burden. He said it was a museum of pain. He was wrong. It was not a museum of pain. It was a monument to survival. Every board, every nail, every paid-off brick was proof that I had weathered the storm. I kept the house not because I was stuck in the past, but because it was the fortress that had saved my future. I did not stop there. Grant had wanted his money to protect me. But now that I was safe, now that the house was secure and the vultures were gone, I had more than I needed. I set up a meeting with Mr. Vance the following week. "I want to start a fund." I told him, "Investments?" he asked. "No," I said, "Charity, the Grant Wynne First Responder Fund. Small grants for the families of paramedics and EMTs who get sick or injured, for the ones who are drowning in copays, for the ones who need groceries while they wait for disability checks." I wanted to make sure that the next time a woman stood in her kitchen, terrified and alone because her husband was dying, an envelope of cash would appear, not from a boot passed around a fire station, but from a legacy that would never run dry. I turned the betrayal into a safety net for strangers. Life moved on. It did not go back to normal, because normal was gone, but a new rhythm emerged. I went back to work, but I set boundaries. I made new friends, people who liked me for my resilience, not my compliance. Caleb came over for dinner every Sunday. We didn't talk much. We just ate steak and watched football, comfortable in the silence of people who have fought in the same trench. 6 months after the funeral, on a Tuesday morning, my phone buzzed. It was an email notification. Sender: Grant Wynne, via FutureSend. Subject: one last thing. I froze. My coffee cup hovered halfway to my mouth. I sat down on the porch swing. I opened the email. "Hey, Chloe. If you are getting this, it has been 6 months. The dust should be settled. You should be safe. I have one last piece of advice. I know you. I know you are probably wondering if you were too hard on them. I know you are probably missing the idea of your mom, or missing the laughs with Brianna. Don't. If they did not come to the funeral, They were never coming to your life. They were only coming to the buffet. You did not lose family. Chloe, you lost weight. Choose people who choose you. Choose the ones who change the tire in the rain. Choose the ones who show up when the chairs are empty. I love you. I am proud of you. Now go live, love, Grant. I put the phone down. I looked out at the street. The leaves were turning gold on the oak tree. The air was crisp. I was alone on the porch. But I was not lonely. I had chosen myself, and that was enough. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It was a journey of heartbreak and justice, and I hope it reminded you that you are stronger than the people who try to use you. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Please drop your city or country in the comments so we can see how far this story has traveled. If you enjoyed watching justice be served, please subscribe to the channel Monica Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story reach more people who might need to hear it. Stay strong and choose the people who choose you.